The crescent moons of Nexus 6 cast an eerie purple glow over Outpost Zenith's eastern perimeter. Lieutenant Kazakh stood at attention, his chitinous exoskeleton gleaming in the alien light as he watched the transport vessel descend through the dense atmosphere. His mandibles clicked in barely concealed irritation. The Chitan officer had better things to do than babysit new recruits, especially a human one. Another water bag, he muttered to himself, antennae twitching in annoyance. Command must be desperate. Behind him, the outpost's massive walls rose 30 meters high, constructed from a combination of reinforced alloys and native stone. Beyond those walls lay one of the most deadly jungles in the known galaxy, a verdant death trap teeming with predators that would make Earth's most fearsome creatures seem like domesticated pets. Even among the diverse species of the Galactic Alliance, Nexus 6 was notorious. Only the Chitans, with their natural armor and superior strength, had managed to establish any permanent presence here. And now they were sending humans. Pathetic. The transport's landing gear extended with a mechanical whine as it touched down on the designated pad. Kazakh stepped forward, mandibles set in what the Alliance training manual described as a welcoming posture. The airlock hissed, and a slender figure emerged, squinting against the violet light. Tessa Morgan was smaller than Kazakh had expected. Her frame looked frail beneath the standard-issue combat fatigues, and her pale skin seemed particularly vulnerable in the harsh alien environment. She carried a single duffel bag over one shoulder and a datapad in her free hand. Her dark hair was pulled back in a tight knot, revealing sharp features and alert eyes that scanned the perimeter with practiced efficiency. "Lieutenant Kazakh," she asked, her voice clear and steady as she approached. "Recruit Specialist Tessa Morgan reporting for duty, sir." Kazakh's compound eyes registered the slight tremor in her hand as she offered a salute. Fear, most likely. Appropriate, given the circumstances. "Welcome to Outpost Zenith. Recruit Morgan," he clicked, the translator at his throat converting the sounds to standard Alliance. "I trust your journey was without incident." "Yes, sir. Though the pilot mentioned something about increased aerial predator activity in the northern quadrant." Kazakh's antennae twitched. That information hadn't been in any reports he'd received. "The pilot spoke to you about outpost security matters?" Morgan's expression remained neutral. "No, sir. I overheard a transmission while we were making our final approach. I thought it might be relevant to report." Interesting. Either unusually attentive or lying to impress. Kazakh would find out which soon enough. "Follow me, recruit. You'll be assigned quarters in the West Barracks with the other new arrivals. Your orientation begins at 0600 hours tomorrow. I suggest you use the time until then to acclimate to our gravity and atmospheric conditions." "Thank you, sir. Will there be time to review the xenobiology briefs before tomorrow's session? I'd like to familiarize myself with the local wildlife." Kazakh paused mid-stride, turning his armored head to regard the human with newfound curiosity. Most recruits asked about recreational facilities or meal schedules. "The briefs are available on the Outpost network, though I doubt reading about our wildlife will prepare you for encountering them." Morgan nodded. "Understood, sir. But I've always found knowledge to be the best first line of defense. On Nexus 6, recruit. Your first line of defense will be staying behind those who possess natural armor." Kazakh gestured to his own exoskeleton. "And your second will be running faster than whatever is chasing you." For the first time, Morgan smiled, a quick, tight expression that vanished almost immediately. "Then I'll be sure to keep up, Lieutenant." As they passed through the massive reinforced gates into the outpost proper, a distant roar echoed from the jungle beyond. Several nearby human technicians flinched at the sound. Morgan did not. Curious, thought Kazakh. Perhaps this water bag might surprise him after all. The morning mist hung heavy over the training grounds as recruits assembled in neat rows before dawn. Dew condensed on Kazakh's exoskeleton as he paced before them, inspecting their gear with critical eyes. 20 new recruits had arrived in the past week, representing 8 different species from across the Alliance. The humans, Morgan and 2 others, were positioned at the end of the formation, looking particularly soft and vulnerable next to the scaled Silosians and the armored Makari warriors. "Today's exercise is simple," Kazakh announced, his translator amplifying his voice across the yard. "You will follow me through the southern perimeter trail, maintaining formation at all times. This is a supervised excursion into classified terrain. You will observe, you will learn, and above all, you will obey commands instantly and without question. Hesitation on Nexus 6 means death." He pointed to the tall, electrified fence that separated the training yard from the jungle beyond. "Once we pass that barrier, you are in hostile territory. The predators of this world have evolved to kill creatures far more formidable than any of you. They are faster, stronger, and more cunning than you can imagine. Your only advantages are your weapons and your squad. Lose either, and you will not return." The recruits shifted uncomfortably, except for Morgan, who stood perfectly still, eyes fixed on the distant tree line. Kazakh noticed that, unlike the others, she had added several non-standard items to her field kit: a small container of mineral salts, a vial of synthesized pheromones, and what appeared to be a rudimentary sound emitter clipped to her belt. "Interesting choices. Unauthorized, but interesting." "Form up," he ordered, turning toward the gate. "Weapons at ready position. Communication channels open at all times." The security barrier deactivated with a low hum, and the massive gate slid open, revealing a narrow path cutting through the towering alien vegetation. The trees of Nexus 6 bore little resemblance to those of Earth or other terrestrial worlds. Their trunks twisted in spirals, covered in purple-black bark that exuded a faint bioluminescence. Tendrils hung from the upper branches, swaying gently despite the lack of wind. "Those tendrils detect movement," Morgan whispered to the nervous human recruit beside her. "They're sensory organs, not actual threats." Kazakh's auditory receptors picked up the comment easily. "Recruit Morgan," he called without turning. "Since you appear to be our resident xenobiology expert, perhaps you'd like to take point position." A ripple of nervous laughter moved through the formation. Taking point in unknown territory was a dangerous assignment, especially for a rookie. "Yes, sir," Morgan replied without hesitation, moving forward through the ranks until she stood just behind Kazakh. "Tell me, recruit." Kazakh clicked softly as they led the group deeper into the forest. "What else have you learned from your reading?" Morgan's eyes continuously scanned the surroundings as she answered. "The dominant predators hunt primarily by vibration and heat signatures, rather than visual identification. The most dangerous specimens include the viper fang, the barbstalker, and the spine ripper, the latter being responsible for most recorded fatalities among Alliance personnel." Kazakh nodded slightly. "Correct. And how would you identify a spine ripper's territory?" "Claw marks on tree trunks, approximately 2 meters from the ground. Distinctive 3-pronged pattern. They also leave partially consumed prey in boundary areas as warning signals to other predators." The Chitan officer found himself genuinely impressed, though he was careful not to show it. "And if you encountered one?" Morgan hesitated for the first time. "Official protocol recommends immediate retreat while firing deterrent rounds. Spine rippers are considered too dangerous for direct engagement by standard infantry." "Also correct." Kazakh gestured toward a massive tree ahead, its trunk scarred with exactly the marks Morgan had described. "Which is why we will be altering our course to avoid the territory ahead." The formation changed direction, following a less defined path that wound between massive fern-like growths and bubbling pools of biochemical sludge. The alien forest grew denser, the light dimming as the canopy closed overhead. Strange calls echoed through the vegetation, some high and piercing, others low and reverberating enough to be felt through the ground. 2 hours into the trek, they reached a shallow river crossing. Kazakh halted the group, allowing them to refill water supplies, while he conferred with the security drones patrolling overhead. Morgan knelt by the water's edge, examining the curious, six-finned fish that darted beneath the surface. A sudden shout of alarm came from the Silosian recruit downstream. The reptilian soldier had wandered slightly from the group and now stood frozen as a mass of writhing vines descended from the canopy above, wrapping around his armored limbs. "Barb Stalker!" someone yelled, and weapons were immediately raised. "Hold fire!" Morgan's voice cut through the panic as she sprinted toward the entrapped recruit. "Those aren't vines, they're sensory tendrils. The actual predator is still in the tree." She skidded to a halt several meters from the struggling Silosian, pulled the sound emitter from her belt, and adjusted it quickly before activating it. A high-pitched wail cut through the air, modulating in a pattern that made several recruits cover their ears. The effect on the tendrils was immediate. They recoiled from the Silosian, withdrawing upward into the canopy with a disturbing speed. A massive shape shifted among the branches, something with too many limbs and a body covered in bony plates. "Back away slowly," Morgan instructed the Silosian, keeping the emitter pointed upward. "It's confused by the frequency. Mimics the territorial call of the spine ripper." The Silosian retreated, moving with remarkable discipline despite the obvious fear in his posture. Once he rejoined the group, Morgan backed away as well, never turning her back on the creature overhead. Kazakh stepped forward, mandibles clicking in what might have been approval. "Quick thinking, Recruit Morgan, though I'm curious how that unauthorized device found its way into your kit." Morgan deactivated the emitter, returning it to her belt. "With respect, sir, I modified it from a standard communications unit. The Barb Stalker's sensory system is highly sensitive to certain frequencies, particularly those used by larger predators. A fact not included in the standard briefing materials," Kazakh noted. "No, sir. I cross-referenced the xenobiology data with acoustic studies from similar ecosystems on Vega Prime." She paused. "I should have requested permission for the modification." Kazakh studied her for a long moment, aware that the entire squad was watching the exchange. Technically, equipment modification without authorization was a punishable offense. But the human had just saved a fellow recruit from a painful death. "Your initiative is noted, Recruit Morgan. In the future, submit your modifications for approval. On this occasion, however, your preparedness proved valuable." He turned to address the full squad. "This is why we study our environment. Knowledge, properly applied, can be as effective as any weapon." As they continued their trek, Kazakh noticed the other recruits giving Morgan curious, respectful glances. The water bag had impressed them, and, though he was reluctant to admit it, she had impressed him as well. Perhaps humans had more potential than he'd believed. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of training exercises, equipment drills, and survival courses. Morgan quickly established herself as an unusual recruit, not the strongest or fastest, but consistently the most prepared. Her understanding of Nexus 6 ecosystem surpassed even some of the veteran officers, and her analytical approach to problem-solving earned grudging respect from instructors across the outpost. It was during a solo navigation exercise in the 4th week that everything changed. Morgan had been assigned to retrieve a marker beacon from a location 3 kilometers into the eastern sector, relatively safe territory by Nexus 6 standards, but still requiring careful movement and constant vigilance. She moved efficiently through the underbrush, following the optimal path plotted the night before, when a disturbance ahead caught her attention. A spine ripper, smaller than the adults depicted in the briefing materials but unmistakable nonetheless. The creature was caught in what appeared to be a natural trap, a patch of adhesive fungal growth that had ensnared one of its powerful hind limbs. It thrashed and roared, its 3-pronged claws slashing at the air in rage and pain. Protocol dictated immediate withdrawal and reporting of the sighting. A juvenile spine ripper likely meant an adult was nearby, and even seasoned combat teams avoided such encounters when possible. Morgan activated her comm unit. Recruit Morgan to command. Spine Ripper sighting at coordinates 42,783. Juvenile specimen, approximately 1.5 meters in length. Currently immobilized. Kazac's voice crackled through the speaker, almost immediately. Acknowledged. Morgan. Withdraw to checkpoint Alpha and await extraction. She hesitated, observing the creature's desperate struggles. The fungal adhesive was spreading up its leg, and the skin beneath was showing signs of a caustic reaction. Without intervention, the juvenile predator would suffer a slow, agonizing death. Sir, requesting permission to attempt assistance. A long silence followed. Then, negative, Morgan. That creature is responsible for more Alliance casualties than any other species on Nexus 6. Withdraw, immediately. Morgan knew she should obey. Her career in the Alliance military could end here if she defied a direct order. But something about the creature's predicament resonated with her, a sense that unnecessary suffering should be prevented, regardless of species. Understood, sir. Withdrawing now? She backed away from the trapped Spine Ripper, moving behind the cover of a large rock formation. Once there, she deactivated her comm unit's tracking function, an action that would certainly result in disciplinary measures later. But she had made her decision. From her pack, Morgan removed the container of mineral salts she'd been carrying since the first day. Studies indicated that the fungal growths of Nexus 6 were highly sensitive to saline solutions, contracting rapidly when exposed. She also retrieved a small medical kit and the sound emitter, modifying its settings to a lower, more soothing frequency that mimicked juvenile Spine Ripper distress calls. Taking a deep breath, she emerged from cover and approached the trapped creature. Emitter extended before her. The Spine Ripper froze, its 6 eyes focusing on her with predatory intensity. It released a warning growl, dorsal spines extending to their full, lethal length. Easy, Morgan murmured, though she knew the creature couldn't understand her words. I'm trying to help. The sound emitter seemed to confuse the Spine Ripper. Its aggressive posture relaxed slightly, though it remained watchful as Morgan slowly circled toward its trapped limb. With methodical precision, she sprinkled the mineral salts onto the adhesive fungus, watching as the purple mass contracted and withered, releasing its grip on the predator's leg. The Spine Ripper pulled free with a sudden jerk, and Morgan fell backward, expecting it to pounce. Instead, the creature hobbled several meters away, then turned to face her, its injured leg held carefully off the ground. The caustic damage was evident, raw, weeping tissue that would likely become infected without treatment. Against all better judgment, Morgan reached for her medical kit. "This is absolutely insane," she whispered to herself, removing a tube of regenerative gel developed for treating chemical burns. "But while I'm already court-martialed..." She squeezed a generous amount onto a long application stick and slowly extended it toward the injured leg. The Spine Ripper growled, but didn't retreat. With extreme caution, Morgan applied the gel to the wounded area, ready to sprint for cover at the first sign of aggression. The predator flinched at the contact, but remained still as the medication took effect. The pain visibly easing as the gel formed a protective coating over the damaged tissue. "There," Morgan said softly, backing away. "That should help." To her astonishment, the Spine Ripper made a sound unlike anything in the xenobiology records, a low, rumbling purr that seemed to emanate from its entire body. It took a tentative step on its treated leg, then another, testing the limb's functionality. Morgan used the opportunity to retreat to a safer distance, reactivating her comm unit. "Recruit Morgan to command. Situation resolved. The Spine Ripper has departed the area. Proceeding to objective." Kazac's reply was immediate and suspicious. "Your tracker was offline for 6 minutes and 20 seconds. Recruit. Explain." "Equipment malfunction, sir. Possibly interference from the local magnetic ore deposits. I'll submit the unit for diagnostic testing upon return." A long pause followed. Complete your objective and return to base. Recruit. We'll discuss this malfunction then. Yes, sir. Morgan continued her mission, retrieving the marker beacon without further incident. As she began the return journey, however, she noticed something unusual, a shadow moving parallel to her path, staying just within the tree line. Occasional glimpses confirmed her suspicion. The juvenile spine ripper was following her. This is unexpected, she muttered, increasing her pace slightly. The creature matched her speed, maintaining a consistent distance, close enough to observe, but far enough to suggest it wasn't hunting her. At least, not yet. When she reached the outpost perimeter, Morgan expected the predator to turn back. Instead, it lingered at the edge of the forest, watching as she approached the security gate. The guards noticed it immediately, raising their weapons. "Hold fire," Morgan called out. "It's just observing." Security Chief Draven, a massive Makari with battle scars covering his scaled hide, glared at her through the fence. "Just observing? That's a spine ripper. Recruit. It's stalking you." "With respect, sir, if it wanted to attack, it would have done so in the forest where it had the advantage." Draven's expression darkened. "Get inside. Now. Lieutenant Kazak is waiting for you." As the gates closed behind her, Morgan glanced back. The spine ripper remained at the forest edge, all 6 eyes fixed on her, before finally turning and disappearing into the undergrowth. Lieutenant Kazak was indeed waiting, along with Commander Vrax, the outpost's commanding officer. The commander was an older Chitan, his exoskeleton bearing the distinctive blue markings of high rank, and his left antenna permanently bent from some long-ago injury. "Recruit Morgan," Vrax began without preamble. "Explain why a juvenile spine ripper followed you to our perimeter." Morgan stood at attention, facing the inevitable consequences of her actions. "Sir, during my mission, I encountered the specimen trapped in a patch of caustic fungus. It would have died painfully without intervention." "So you intervened," Kazak stated flatly, despite direct orders to withdraw. "Yes, sir." Vrax's mandibles clicked rapidly, the Chitan equivalent of an exasperated sigh. "You risked your life, violated direct orders, and potentially compromised outpost security to save a predator that has killed dozens of Alliance personnel." "I believed I could help without endangering myself or the mission, sir." "And the creature followed you home like a pet," Draven interjected, entering the room with heavy footsteps. "Perfect. Next, you'll be inviting it inside for dinner." Commander Vrax raised a clawed appendage, silencing the security chief. "How exactly did you free this creature, recruit?" Morgan explained the procedure in detail, from the mineral salts to the medical treatment. When she finished, the 3 officers exchanged glances laden with unspoken communication. "You're aware that unauthorized modification of equipment and going off comm are court-martial offenses," Kazak said, finally. "Yes, sir." Vrax leaned forward. "And you still chose to help this creature?" "Yes, sir. I believe unnecessary suffering should be prevented when possible, regardless of species." A long silence followed, broken eventually by Commander Vrax. "You'll be confined to quarters when not on duty, pending a full review of this incident. Lieutenant Kazak will supervise all your future field exercises personally." He rose from his seat. "Dismissed." Morgan saluted and turned to leave, expecting worse punishment. As she reached the door, Vrax added, "And Morgan, your mineral salt experiment should be documented for the scientific division. It may prove useful." Was that tacit approval? Morgan couldn't be sure, but she nodded respectfully before departing. Outside, as darkness fell over the outpost, she heard a distant, distinctive call from beyond the perimeter, the rumbling purr of a juvenile spine ripper, echoing through the alien night. The following morning, alarms blared across Outpost Zenith. Morgan rushed from her quarters, joining the flood of personnel heading toward their emergency stations. She spotted Kazak directing troops near the eastern gate, and hurried to report. "Sir, what's happening?" The Chitan lieutenant didn't look at her, focused on the tactical display projected from his wrist unit. "Perimeter breach, eastern quadrant, multiple hostile signatures." Morgan followed his gaze to the screen, where red dots indicated movement patterns along the fence line. The signatures were familiar, spine rippers, at least 5 of them, moving with the coordinated precision of a hunting pack. "That's unusual behavior," she noted. "Spine rippers are typically solitary hunters." "Typically," Kazakh agreed grimly. "But something's agitating the local wildlife. All predator species are showing increased aggression and pack behavior since 0300 hours." A commotion at the gate drew their attention. Security Chief Draven was shouting orders as guards raised weapons towards something outside the perimeter. Morgan pushed forward for a better view and froze in surprise. The juvenile spine ripper, recognizable by the healing scar on its hind leg, was pacing outside the fence, occasionally charging toward the barrier before retreating. Unlike the other signatures on the tactical display, it wasn't attempting to breach the perimeter, but seemed instead to be trying to get their attention. "That's the same one," Morgan said, moving closer to the gate. "The one I treated." Draven turned sharply. "Stay back, recruit. This isn't a reunion." But Morgan was watching the creature's behavior closely. It wasn't displaying typical hunting patterns. When it spotted her approaching, it made the same purring sound she'd heard the day before, then darted a short distance away before returning, as if trying to lead them somewhere. "Sir," she addressed Kazakh, who had joined them at the gate. "I think it's trying to communicate." Draven snorted. "It's a predator, not a messenger service." "Maybe," Kazakh replied thoughtfully. "But its behavior is atypical." He studied the tactical display again. "And so is that of every other predator species within sensor range." Commander Vrax's voice came through the comm system. "All personnel, be advised. Long-range scanners have detected an unidentified vessel in orbit. Possible connection to wildlife behavioral anomalies is being investigated." Morgan's mind raced. "Sir, many predator species on Nexus 6 hunt using infrasound to disorient prey. What if someone is broadcasting frequencies that affect their behavior?" Kazakh's antennae straightened in alarm. "The Kriaks!" The name sent a chill through the assembled troops. The Kriaks were a hostile species, known for biological warfare and ecosystem manipulation. They had been engaged in a shadow war with the Alliance for decades, rarely confronting military forces directly, but instead destabilizing colony worlds through ecological attacks. "If they're using sonic manipulation," Morgan continued, "my emitter might help us analyze the frequencies." Kazakh considered for only a moment before nodding. "Do it." Morgan retrieved her modified emitter from her quarters and returned to the gate, where the juvenile spine ripper, now dubbed Rex by some of the watching soldiers, continued its agitated pacing. She activated the device in analysis mode, scanning for unusual frequency patterns. The results appeared on her datapad almost immediately. "There's definitely a broadcast signal. Low frequency, complex modulation pattern. It's artificial." Kazakh reviewed the data, mandibles clicking rapidly. "Can you isolate it?" "Yes, but counteracting it would require a significantly more powerful broadcast system than my portable unit." Commander Vrax joined them, his experienced eyes quickly assessing the situation. "The communications array could be modified to broadcast a countersignal, but we'd need to determine the exact frequency pattern and create an inversion algorithm, which would require access to the source of the original broadcast," Kazakh added. "The Kriaks vessel." Morgan looked at the juvenile spine ripper, still pacing anxiously outside the fence. An idea formed, dangerous, possibly suicidal, but potentially effective. "Or," she said slowly, "we could use a mobile receiver to collect data from multiple locations, triangulating the source and mapping the signal strength across the territory." Vrax's compound eyes fixed on her. And how would this mobile receiver navigate through predator-infested jungle that's being actively agitated by enemy broadcast? Morgan gestured toward Rex. With local guidance. The resulting argument was heated and prolonged. Draven vehemently opposed the plan, calling it a death wish disguised as strategy. Several other officers supported his position, but Kazakh, surprisingly, advocated for Morgan's proposal. The recruit has demonstrated unusual rapport with this creature, he argued, and her xenobiology knowledge exceeds our specialists. If anyone can succeed, she can... Commander Vrax listened to both sides before reaching his decision. The Kriak's vessel will likely begin ground operations soon. We don't have time for conventional scouting. Morgan's plan, while unorthodox, offers our best chance at countering their signal before the situation deteriorates further. He turned to Morgan. You'll have 6 hours to collect the necessary data. Lieutenant Kazakh will accompany you as tactical support. If at any point he determines the mission is compromised, you will abort immediately and return to base. Is that clear? Yes, sir. One more thing, Vrax added. This mission is strictly voluntary. The risk level exceeds standard operational parameters. Morgan stood straighter. I volunteer, sir. Kazakh clicked his mandibles together sharply. As do I. Preparations moved quickly after that. Morgan was equipped with an enhanced data collection unit, capable of detailed signal analysis. Kazakh selected weapons optimized for predator defense, including sonic disruptors and high-intensity strobe grenades. Both received emergency medical implants that would allow the outpost to monitor their vital signs and location. As twilight approached, they stood before the eastern gate, watching as Rex continued his vigilant pacing. The other predator signatures had moved deeper into the jungle, but sensors indicated increased activity throughout the ecosystem. This plan requires the cooperation of a wild predator, Draven reminded them unnecessarily. If it turns on you, then we'll deal with it. Kazakh interrupted. Open the gate! The massive barrier slid aside just enough for 2 figures to slip through. Rex immediately focused on Morgan, approaching cautiously, but without aggression. She knelt, activating her modified emitter at its lowest setting, a sound that seemed to calm the creature. Hello again, she said softly. We need your help. Whether the spine ripper understood her words was impossible to know, but it responded to her tone and presence, moving closer until it stood barely a meter away. Up close, Morgan could see that her medical treatment had been effective. The caustic wound was healing cleanly. Kazakh watched with what might have been amazement, visible even through his alien features. I've never seen anything like this, he admitted. In 20 cycles of service on Nexus 6, I've never witnessed a spine ripper approach a sentient without attacking. Morgan slowly rose to her feet, maintaining eye contact with Rex. He recognizes me, and he knows something's wrong in his territory. She gestured toward the tree line. We need to go that way. Can you show us a safe path? For a tense moment, nothing happened. Then Rex turned and moved a short distance toward the forest, looking back as if to ensure they were following. Remarkable, Kazakh murmured. Absolutely remarkable. They moved into the jungle as darkness fell completely, the native bioluminescence providing just enough light to navigate by. Rex led them along game trails too narrow for conventional patrols, occasionally stopping to scent the air or listen to distant sounds. Morgan collected signal data at regular intervals, mapping the strength and pattern of the Kriak's broadcast. The signal is getting stronger to the northeast, she reported, after their third stop. But it's not uniform. There are nodes, points where it seems to be amplified. Kazakh studied the tactical display built into his armor's forearm. The Kriaks must have deployed ground transmitters to strengthen the orbital broadcast, standard procedure for their ecological warfare operations. A distant roar echoed through the trees, deeper and more menacing than Rex's vocalizations. Adult spine ripper, Kazakh identified immediately. At least 3 kilometers away, but moving in this direction. Rex grew visibly agitated, his dorsal spines extending and retracting rhythmically. Morgan consulted her datapad. The signal is particularly strong in that direction. I think the Kriaks are using the broadcast to drive apex predators toward the outpost. Classic Kriak strategy. Kazakh agreed. Use the native fauna as the first wave of attack, then strike while defenses are compromised. A sudden rustle in the undergrowth caused both of them to freeze. Rex growled, positioning himself between them and the disturbance. A moment later, a barbstalker emerged, a nightmarish creature resembling a cross between a centipede and a manta ray, its body lined with poisonous barbs. Under normal circumstances, the predator would have retreated from the presence of a spine ripper. Instead, it charged directly toward them, clearly affected by the Kriak signal. Kazakh raised his weapon, but before he could fire, Rex launched himself at the barbstalker with shocking speed. The two creatures collided in a flurry of claws, spines, and barbs. Morgan pulled Kazakh behind a massive tree trunk as the predators tore into each other. "He's protecting us," she whispered, astonished. The fight was brief, but vicious. Rex's natural armor deflected most of the barbstalker's attacks, while his powerful claws found vulnerable points in the attacker's exoskeleton. Within moments, the barbstalker retreated, leaving a trail of greenish ichor as it disappeared into the undergrowth. Rex returned to them, bleeding from several puncture wounds but otherwise intact. Without hesitation, Morgan approached with her medical kit. "This is going to sting," she warned, applying antiseptic gel to the most serious wounds. The spine ripper flinched, but allowed the treatment, making that now familiar purring sound as the medication took effect. Kazakh watched the interaction with growing amazement. "The implications of this are significant," he said finally. "If one species can form such a connection with the native fauna, we could establish a true symbiotic relationship with this ecosystem rather than fighting it constantly." Morgan finished. "But first, we need to stop the Kriak signal before every predator on Nexus 6 converges on the outpost." The data they had collected revealed a pattern. 5 ground transmitters arranged in a pentagonal formation around Outpost Zenith, each broadcasting a portion of the complex signal that was agitating the wildlife. The transmitters were synchronized with the orbital vessel, creating a coverage area that encompassed the entire region. "We need to disrupt all 5 transmitters simultaneously," Morgan explained as they crouched in a small clearing, examining the compiled data. "Otherwise, the remaining ones will simply compensate and the effect will continue." Kazakh activated his comm unit. "Kazakh to command. We've identified 5 ground transmitters' coordinates being uploaded now. Request strike teams deployed to each location." Commander Vrax's response came through clearly, despite the distance. "Negative, Lieutenant. We've detected Kriak's ground forces at each transmitter site. With the Predator situation at the perimeter, we can't spare enough personnel for 5 simultaneous strikes." Morgan studied the signal pattern one more time, an alternative plan forming. "We don't need to destroy the transmitters," she said suddenly. "We just need to alter their broadcast to create a cancellation pattern." "Explain," Vrax demanded over the comm. "The Kriaks are using harmonic resonance to amplify their signal across the ecosystem. If we can introduce a disruptive element to that harmonization, essentially adding noise to their broadcast, the effect should cascade through the network." "And how would you introduce this noise?" Morgan looked at Rex, who was alertly watching the surrounding jungle. "We'd need to reach the central transmitter, the one coordinating the others, and upload a modified signal pattern." Kazakh indicated a point on the tactical map. "That would be this one, approximately 4 kilometers northeast of our position, deep in Spine Ripper territory. Which gives us an advantage," Morgan countered. "Rex can guide us through the territory more safely than anywhere else." A long silence followed before Vrax responded. "Proceed to the central transmitter. A technical team is preparing the disruptive signal pattern now. We'll transmit it to your datapad when ready. As they moved deeper into the jungle, guided by their unlikely ally, Morgan became increasingly aware of the changes in the ecosystem. Creatures that should have remained hidden were moving openly, many displaying unusually aggressive behavior. Twice more they encountered predators that Rex had to drive away, once a pack of viper fangs that scattered at his approach, and later a juvenile barbstalker that retreated after a brief confrontation. The signal is affecting the entire predator hierarchy, Morgan observed, forcing competition in territories that would normally be strictly divided. Kazakh, who had been unusually quiet since their last communication with the outpost, finally spoke. "You've proven me wrong, Morgan." She glanced at him, surprised. "Sir?" "About humans. About their place in the Alliance military." His compound eyes reflected the bioluminescent light as he continued. "I believed your species was too fragile, too removed from natural instincts to thrive in environments like Nexus 6. But your approach, using understanding rather than force, has been more effective than our traditional methods." Before Morgan could respond, Rex froze ahead of them, his posture suddenly rigid with alertness. They stopped immediately, following his gaze into the darkness beyond. There, barely visible among the twisted vegetation, stood an adult spine ripper, nearly 3 meters tall at the shoulder, with dorsal spines fully extended and all 6 eyes fixed on them with predatory focus. It was a nightmare given form. Even Rex seemed hesitant, making a low warning sound in his throat. "Don't move," Kazakh whispered unnecessarily. "Adult males are territorial to the extreme." Morgan's mind raced. The juvenile's presence might be interpreted as a challenge, especially with the Kriak signal heightening aggressive instincts. But perhaps, moving slowly, she reached for her sound emitter, adjusting it to a specific frequency she had observed in Rex's communications, the rumbling purr he made when calm. With a silent prayer to whatever cosmic forces might be listening, she activated the device. The effect was not immediate. The adult spine ripper took a step forward, its massive claws leaving deep gouges in the forest floor. Rex positioned himself protectively in front of Morgan and Kazakh, but didn't advance. The standoff stretched for what felt like an eternity. Then, gradually, the adult's posture changed. Its dorsal spines lowered slightly, and its head tilted as if listening more intently to the emitter's output. After another tense moment, it released a vocalization, not a roar or growl, but a deeper, more resonant version of Rex's purr. "It's responding to the frequency," Morgan whispered. "I think it recognizes Rex as part of its territory, but is confused by our presence." Kazakh's hand remained on his weapon. "Can you communicate our non-hostile intent?" "I can try." Morgan adjusted the emitter again, combining elements of Rex's purr with a lower, more submissive tone. The adult spine ripper listened, then slowly backed several steps away, creating a narrow path through the vegetation. "I think," Morgan said carefully, "it's allowing us passage." They proceeded with extreme caution, keeping the sound emitter active and allowing Rex to lead. The adult spine ripper followed at a distance, watching but not approaching further. Its behavior was unprecedented, a clear deviation from everything recorded about the species. The Kriak signal must be disrupting normal territorial instincts, Kazakh theorized as they continued, creating unusual alliances in response to the perceived threat. Or, Morgan suggested, the spine rippers are more socially complex than we realized, and we've simply never attempted to communicate properly before. The central transmitter came into view an hour later, a sleek, alien device rising from the forest floor like a metallic thorn. Its surface pulsed with subtle light patterns, and the air around it seemed to vibrate with unseen energy. More concerning were the figures moving around its base, Kriak soldiers, their insectoid forms distinguishable even in the dim light. 4 hostiles, Kazakh reported, analyzing the scene through his tactical visor. Standard armament. The transmitter appears to have a central access panel near the base. Morgan checked her datapad, where the disruptive signal pattern had been uploaded by the outpost's technical team. I'll need approximately 30 seconds of uninterrupted access to upload the pattern. Then we'll need a diversion. Kazakh studied the clearing, then glanced at Rex and the adult spine ripper, still lurking at the edge of the vegetation. And I believe we have one. The plan was simple, but dangerous. Kazakh would use his sonic disruptors to create a disturbance on the far side of the clearing, drawing the Kriak's guards away from the transmitter. Meanwhile, Morgan would approach from the opposite direction with Rex, using the confusion to reach the access panel. The adult spine ripper remained a wild card. They could only hope it wouldn't interfere. As Kazakh moved into position, Morgan knelt beside Rex, looking directly into his alien eyes. "I need your help one more time," she said softly. "Then you can go home." Whether the creature understood her words or merely her intent, he remained close as she began crawling through the underbrush toward the transmitter. The Kriak's guards were alert but focused outward, expecting threats from the jungle rather than an infiltration. The diversion, when it came, was more effective than they could have hoped. Kazakh's sonic disruptors created a cacophony that perfectly mimicked the hunting calls of multiple apex predators. The Kriak's guards reacted immediately, 3 of them moving toward the disturbance with weapons raised. Only one remained at the transmitter base, scanning the tree line nervously. Morgan waited until the others were out of sight, then whispered to Rex, "Now." The juvenile spine ripper burst from cover with a roar that seemed impossibly loud for his size. The remaining guard spun toward the sound, weapon tracking the movement, but he never had a chance to fire. From the opposite side of the clearing, the adult spine ripper emerged like a force of nature, charging directly at the startled Kriaks. In the ensuing chaos, Morgan sprinted for the transmitter. The access panel was exactly where Kazakh had indicated, its alien interface glowing with symbols she didn't recognize. Thankfully, the upload process had been simplified by the technical team. She needed only to press her datapad against the panel's surface and activate the transfer protocol. The seconds crawled by as the data uploaded. Behind her, the sounds of combat filled the clearing, weapon fire, alien shrieks, and the terrifying roars of the spine rippers. She forced herself to focus on the transfer, watching as the progress indicator crept toward completion. A shadow fell across her just as the upload reached 90%. Morgan looked up to find a Kriak's guard standing over her, weapon aimed directly at her head. She froze, knowing any sudden movement would result in her immediate death. The guard chittered something in its native language, probably a demand for surrender, but before Morgan could respond, a blur of motion struck from the side. Rex slammed into the guard with devastating force, knocking the weapon aside. The two tumbled away in a tangle of limbs and claws. Morgan turned back to the datapad, 98% complete, 99%. "Upload successful," the device announced as the final bit of data transferred. The transmitter's pulsing lights flickered, then changed pattern, the vibration in the air shifting to a different resonance. The effect rippled outward visibly, like a wave moving through the forest. The adult spine ripper, which had been engaged with another guard, suddenly stopped, shaking its massive head as if clearing it. The Kriak soldiers hesitated, touching the communication devices at their throats in obvious confusion. "It's working," Morgan breathed, retrieving her datapad and backing away from the transmitter. "The disruptive signal is breaking their control pattern." Rex returned to her side, bleeding from several new wounds, but moving with purpose. The juvenile spine ripper nudged her away from the transmitter, toward the forest edge where Kazakh was now emerging, weapon still raised defensively. "Command, this is Kazakh." The lieutenant reported into his comm unit. Signal disruption successful. Confirm effects at other transmitter sites. Commander Vrax's voice came through clearly. Confirmed, Lieutenant. All transmitters showing disrupted patterns. Predator aggression levels dropping across all monitored territories. The Kriak's vessel has gone silent, possibly disabled by the feedback through their control system. The Kriak's guards, realizing their operation had failed, retreated into the darkness, abandoning the transmitter site. The adult spine ripper watched them go, then turned its attention to Rex and the two humanoids. For a tense moment, Morgan feared it might attack now that the artificial aggression was fading. Instead, it made that resonant purring sound once more, lowered its head in what almost seemed like acknowledgement, and disappeared into the jungle. Rex watched it go, then looked to Morgan expectantly. "You should go too," she told him gently. "This is your home, not ours." The juvenile spine ripper hesitated, moving closer to nuzzle against her hand, an action so unexpectedly gentle it brought tears to Morgan's eyes. Then, with a final purring sound, it turned and followed the path the adult had taken, vanishing among the twisted vegetation. "A most unexpected alliance," Kazakh observed, coming to stand beside her. "One that may have saved Outpost Zenith." Morgan watched the spot where Rex had disappeared, a complex mix of emotions washing over her. Maybe it's a beginning, rather than an end, a new approach to how we interact with this world. The return journey to the outpost was almost anticlimactic. With the Kriak signal neutralized, the forest's predators had returned to their normal territories and behaviors. They encountered no hostile creatures, though Morgan couldn't help scanning the tree line for a glimpse of Rex. As they approached the perimeter, they could see that the situation had stabilized. The predators that had been gathering at the fence had dispersed, and repair teams were already addressing the damage from earlier attacks. Commander Vrax and Security Chief Draven waited at the gate, along with a crowd of curious personnel. "Mission successful, Commander," Kazakh reported as they passed through the barrier. "The Kriak's transmitters have been neutralized, and their vessel appears to have abandoned orbit." Vrax's compound eyes studied them both. "Through highly unorthodox methods, according to your communications." "Yes, sir," Morgan acknowledged. "We established communication with the native predators, specifically the spine rippers, and utilized their territorial behavior to our advantage." Draven looked skeptical. "You're claiming you communicated with the deadliest predators on Nexus 6. "Not claiming, Chief," Kazakh interjected. "I witnessed it directly." Recruit Morgan demonstrated an unprecedented ability to interpret and respond to spine ripper vocalizations and behavior patterns. Without that ability, the mission would have failed. Commander Vrax was silent for a long moment, antennae twitching thoughtfully. "Recruit Morgan, you will report to the Xenobiology Division at 0800 tomorrow. Your experiences and observations will be recorded in detail for further study." "Yes, sir." "Furthermore," Vrax continued, "I am recommending your transfer from combat training to the Research Division, with a specialization in interspecies communication. Your skills would be wasted on standard military deployment." Morgan blinked in surprise. "Sir? Unless you object to the assignment." "No, sir, I would be honored." As the crowd dispersed and medical personnel approached to treat their injuries, Kazakh pulled Morgan aside. "This is unprecedented, you understand. A human recruit being assigned to lead research on a Cheetan outpost." "Why me?" she asked quietly. "There must be more qualified xenobiologists in the Alliance." Kazakh's mandibles clicked in what she had come to recognize as amusement. "Perhaps, but none who have a spine ripper following them like a domesticated pet." He gestured toward the perimeter fence, where a familiar form could be seen moving just beyond the tree line. Rex, watching from a distance. Some connections transcend species barriers, it seems, and those connections may prove more valuable than any weapon in the challenges ahead. Morgan smiled, raising a hand toward the distant predator. "He came back." "I suspect he never truly left," Kazakh replied. "And now, neither will you." In the months that followed, Outpost Zenith underwent a transformation. The Xenobiology Division expanded significantly, with Morgan at the center of a new initiative focused on communication with Nexus 6 native species. The perimeter defenses remained in place, but gates were established at strategic points, allowing controlled interaction with the surrounding ecosystem. Rex became a regular visitor, eventually bringing others of his kind to the outpost's edges. Through patient observation and Morgan's growing understanding of their vocalizations and behavior, a rudimentary form of communication was established. The Spine Rippers proved to be highly intelligent pack hunters with complex social structures, far from the mindless killers they had been portrayed as in earlier reports. As winter approached, bringing violent electrical storms that ravaged the jungle, Morgan stood at an observation post, watching as a small group of Spine Rippers sought shelter near the outpost walls. Among them was Rex, now almost fully grown, his scarred leg the only reminder of their first encounter. Lieutenant Kazakh joined her, his exoskeleton glistening with moisture from the misty air. "The Council has approved the expansion of the research program," he informed her. 5 more xenobiologists will be arriving next month, along with specialized communication equipment. "That's excellent news," Morgan replied, not taking her eyes from the Spine Rippers. "I've been developing a more sophisticated vocal synthesizer based on the recordings we've collected. I think we're close to establishing meaningful two-way communication." Kazakh followed her gaze to where Rex was organizing the younger Spine Rippers into a sheltered formation against the storm. "He's become a pack leader, much like someone else I know." Morgan smiled at the comparison. "We've both found our place, I suppose." "Indeed." The Chitan officer's tone grew more serious. "The Alliance Intelligence Division has reported increased Kriax activity in neighboring systems. They may attempt another incursion." "They'll find Nexus 6 much better defended if they do," Morgan said confidently. "Not just by our technology, but by its native guardians." As if on cue, Rex raised his head and released a resonant call that echoed across the compound. From the distant jungle came answering calls, dozens of them, from Spine Rippers and other predator species alike, a chorus of wild voices united in their defense of shared territory. "I still don't understand it fully," Kazakh admitted. "How a human recruit managed to forge a connection that eluded our best efforts for decades." Morgan considered the question, watching as Rex settled his pack into a protective formation. "Perhaps because I approached without assuming superiority. On Earth, humans were never the strongest or fastest predators. We survived through cooperation and understanding. Maybe that perspective was what was needed here." Lightning flashed across the sky, illuminating the Spine Rippers in stark relief against the darkening landscape. In that moment, they looked less like monsters and more like fellow survivors, adapting to a harsh world through intelligence and cooperation. "You were just a human recruit," Kazakh mused, echoing words he had thought but never spoken aloud when Morgan first arrived. "But you understood something the rest of us missed." Morgan smiled as Rex looked directly at her, those 6 alien eyes somehow conveying recognition across the species barrier. "That the strongest connections aren't formed through dominance, but through respect, even with the deadliest predators in the galaxy." As the storm intensified around them, human and Chitan stood together, watching over their unlikely allies, a new kind of unity forged in the hostile wilderness of Nexus 6, and perhaps a model for the future of the Alliance itself.